Simply Red with Just Like You. Welcome back. It is the Country Viewpoint here on your colour of country life, Flow FM. Well, it's time to now go to David Littleproud. He's the federal member for Maranoa and also the leader of the Federal National Party and the Shadow Minister for Agriculture. It's great to have you on the line with us, David. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a very important week, as you'll note, being National Agriculture Week, and it is National Ag Day tomorrow, David. So this is a very important industry and one that's currently in the grips of some challenging times. What words would you put out there to signify how important this industry is to the country?
Well, to our farmers, I'd say hold on. They feel as though they're under siege from this government. But to those that walk into a shop, and whether it be a grocery shop or whether it be a clothes shop, just understand that the food and fibre you enjoy has come from the hard work, the commitment and the effort of our Australian farmers, and that shouldn't be taken for granted. And if they're not given the right environment to create that, to grow your food and fibre, then invariably they leave and your food and fibre goes up in price. And that's what's happening at the moment. This government, in just 18 months, in an unprecedented way, we haven't seen for 40-odd years, we've now seen that the NFF has a full-on campaign against the federal government. That has not happened for 40 years. And it's all because of them banning live sheep, taking away the agricultural visa. It's about a biosecurity tax on farmers to pay for their foreign competitors to bring their product into this country and treat the biosecurity risk of their competitors so they can put their product on Australian shelves against Australian farmers, which is just abhorrent in any shape you can think of. It's the transmission lines and solar panels that are going across and tearing up our food security. So there's a lot that our farmers are bearing at the moment, and there's also the Murray-Darling. And so they feel under siege, and all credit to the NFF. I think they've been quiet for a while, but now they've found their voice. The new president, David Johinke, I think has done a good job in setting the tone and saying that he's not going to stand for it, and we're going to stand with him. And I think it's important that in this important week, we just understand that things are pretty tough on the land, but governments don't need to make it tough for them, and that's what's happening with this government.
Yeah, we did have David Johinke on the program last week, and he's made a very strong start to the role that he's in, the very important role, of course. The Keep Farmers Farming campaign, the importance of that, how across this are you, David? How involved are you in this?
Oh, look, the National stands shoulder to shoulder with the NFF on this. I mean, I've had my blues with the NFF mainly because I was concerned they weren't saying enough. And this is why DJ's done a great job in coming out strong on the first day that he was elected as president, that he was going to stand up and take this government on. Because when you look at what they're being attacked on, the live sheep, there's no scientific basis to ban the live sheep export industry in this country. Zero. The science actually demonstrates that if you take it away, what will happen is you'll have perverse animal welfare outcomes because the countries that will take our markets don't operate to the standard that we do. And that's not just in the transport of these sheep, it's also in the processing. We won't have influence on that, and these animal activists are morally bankrupt by wanting to shut this down. This government is just inept, and they're saying that there's no economic impact to the industry. I mean, you only have to look at what sheep prices are at the moment. Anthony Albanese and Murray Watt have made not a logical decision that doesn't make the practical reality of what farmers are experiencing now. They just simply don't care. They don't understand it. The taking away the ag visa, what you're also seeing is that we've got meat processors working at 60% capacity because they can't get the workers. They said that all they could use was the PALM scheme. The PALM scheme at best can do 42,000 workers, and the NFF and COSBOA said that we need 172,000 at the Labor's Jobs and Skills Summit. So they're ignoring them on that, and just the ideological view of this government charging their own farmers to pay for their foreign competitors to bring their product in to cover their biosecurity costs so they can compete with them on Australian supermarket shelves. Who does that? Who does that to their own people, to their own farmers? It's just insane. But the big sleeper is these transmission lines and renewable projects. We're not against them, but there's a place for them. And taking away food security and driving up food prices is not the right way to have an energy system. And it might feel good for people in the capital cities, but for us out here, we bear the cost of it. So we think there needs to be a sensible plan on that. And the Nationals believe passionately in bringing nuclear energy so that we don't need to build the transmission lines. We can plug them in where existing coal-fired power stations are and there's not the footprint and there's not the pain for regional Australia. So farmers feeling under threat, and good on the NFF for standing up, and good on DJ.
David Littleproud, the Federal National Party leader, joining us in the third hour of our show today. We'll continue the conversation on the other side of this short break. Don't go anywhere. Matchbox 20 with Don't Get Me Wrong, and welcome back. It's the third hour of the Thursday Country Viewpoint program here on Flow FM. I've got David Littleproud on the line. He's the federal member for Maranoa and is also the Shadow Minister for Agriculture and, of course, the leader of the Federal National Party. David, we'll switch things up to the telecommunications sector, and it was a pretty difficult week for a lot of people last week, including myself, David. Optus finally coming out somehow. It took them nearly a week, but they've finally come out and given an explanation for the outage last week. It has to do with the parent company Singtel. Was it a justifiable explanation? I suppose it was a pretty tech-savvy one. I'd assume many people after the incident would prefer just something in layman's terms. David, is the explanation one that is justifiable, and how do you see it from the Nationals' point of view? We know that Labor's called for a review. How would you assess it if you were in government?
Yeah, look, it was a little over my head. I'm not tech-savvy, but I think it is important we learn from what's happened here so that we can try and mitigate that it doesn't happen again. And that's why the Nationals have been calling for roaming for some time, particularly in rural and remote areas. You, the Australian taxpayer, have put in over 1,500 new mobile phone towers when we were in government. And some of those are Optus, some of those are Telstra, and some of those are Vodafone. And unfortunately, what happens is that if you had an Optus phone last week, you couldn't use a Telstra tower or you couldn't use a Vodafone tower. So you're tied to just the tower that those companies own. Now, when you've made those big investments across this country, we believe that you should have access to every company's tower. Now, we've got to be careful to phase this in, and that's what the Nationals are saying. Phase this in rural, regional and remote Australia, where you bring in roaming, you allow, no matter what your phone company you're with, you can use anyone's tower in layman's terms. You should do that. We should work it up and prove it up. And then as you build capacity, move it into the capital cities. And I think this builds redundancy into our telecommunication systems, because you saw what happened when they went down last week. No one, in the modern day, people couldn't do business and people's lives are at risk. So why wouldn't we build redundancy into our telecommunication system so that we can use each other's towers? In the cities, we need to build a bit more capacity on that, because it probably would have brought everyone down, because you put 10 million customers concentrated in Sydney and Melbourne, then that would have been a real challenge for those towers in those areas. But that's why you start in regional, rural and remote areas where we could use all the towers. And that would expand the coverage as well in rural and remote areas, because we've got some isolated towers with Optus that you might drive past but you can't use, and so you miss out. And in the bush, that's sometimes life and death as well. So we just think there's a pathway forward. We should learn from this, and the Nationals have been pushing for roaming for some time, and we just hope that the government takes our hand on this one.
I suppose it was a significant incident last week because of the fact that it took a national outage for there to be a national headline about a lack of connectivity. But constituents from your side there, David, would be telling you all the time about the black spots they encounter on a daily basis.
Yeah, the biggest complaints we get through my electoral office is about Telstra. They're the major provider, whether it be landline or whether it be mobile phone towers. And they're the actual towers that are in existence. And this is the other piece of the policy puzzle that needs to come into this. We have a universal service obligation that protects landlines, and it was brought into place when Telstra was privatised. It doesn't cover mobile phones and mobile phone towers, because when Telstra was privatised, that technology wasn't around. No one had mobile phones. So we should shift the regulatory guide rails. Telstra have paid $270 million a year to maintain payphones and landlines. We believe that should expand into mobile phone towers, because they're not maintaining mobile phone towers in regional and remote areas, and that's not a positive thing for us, because they're getting away with blue murder. The taxpayers invariably put most of these towers up. They're just letting them run down, and they're taking whatever money they can and making whatever profit they can and not maintaining them. And this is where we need to step in. And I've got to say, one of the things I'm disappointed in us as a coalition government, the Nats were pushing for this, and we just couldn't get that regulatory change done quick enough. And I think it's disappointing, but I hope this new government will do something about it.
To the state of our regional and rural roads, and the Grattan Institute report, which was released on Monday on potholes, said that it will take $1 billion to fix rural roads riddled with potholes around the country, and that it is a dangerous disgrace, of course, to many of us in the regional and rural parts of the country. This comes as no surprise, David. But the fact that it's going to take $1 billion, what did you make of that?
It doesn't surprise me. I mean, the cost of roads and anything you build these days has gone up. But the extent to which this problem is amplifying across every state is the fact that we've got city-centric state governments, and the process is that they identify road priorities, and they simply come to Canberra and ask us to cut a cheque on an 80-20 split. Now, the new government is going 50-50 now. They're changing that back, which I fear will have a greater detrimental impact on regional Australia, because our city-centric state governments will simply say, let's just put it all into urban networks rather than rural and remote roads. We had a rural remote road program, and we had roads of strategic importance that went to making sure there was direct money. We forgot about what the priorities the state put out there, and the feds, when we were in government, decided to put it into the projects we wanted that were getting missed out, particularly in regional areas. So one of the big focuses that we'll be looking at as we get to the next election is a roads package for regional, rural and remote Australia to make sure that those roads are maintained and upgraded where they need to, because they're the arteries that keep this country going. Because if it wasn't for regional Australia, the bills wouldn't have been paid over the last couple of years. Our surplus wasn't because of the magic work of Jim Chalmers and Anthony Albanese. It was because of agriculture. It was because of resources, and they're all created and mined and developed in regional areas. And you need roads to get that to port and into plates around the country, and that's why we need our fair share, and it'll be important that we do show that to the Australian people before we go to the next election, that that's where we'll prioritise our money.
Do you feel as though the current government harbours enough concerns for rural and remote councils who, according to the report, are in an impossible position to take on the expectations to maintain these roads?
Oh, totally. I mean, they have no interest. They have no seats west of the Great Divide, effectively, and so they have no interest in it. And that's not the right way, and that's not what Anthony Albanese said he'd do when he became Prime Minister. And I said publicly to him, let's have a structured infrastructure program for the 30% of Australians that live outside a capital city. Let's weight it, that every infrastructure budget, there is money set aside for us. And that should be predicated not just on a blunt instrument of population, but on the kilometres of roads that we have to maintain out here. And these small councils don't have the rate base. Some of them have got a few thousand, some are even small. I've got a shire that's only got 100 ratepayers, yet they're managing hundreds of thousands of kilometres of roads, these councils, and they don't have the rate base to support that. And this is where federal and state governments need to step up and support these local councils and make sure that they're given some support that, unfortunately, I think this government is walking away from. They're pumping it all into the Melbourne Metro link and all these types of beautiful projects for these people that want to cram themselves into Melbourne. But unfortunately, they're forgetting us, and they're forgetting where the wealth of this country is being created to pay our bills, which is in the regions.
Leader of the Federal National Party and the Shadow Minister for Agriculture, David Littleproud, we know how busy you are, and we thank you very much for your time on the Country Viewpoint. All the best.
Thanks for having me.
David Littleproud rounding things out for us on the Country Viewpoint on this Thursday. We'll wrap things up right after this break. Don't go anywhere.